Welcome, everyone, to this demonstration of ArchivesSpace and an overview of ArchivesSpace member benefits. I'm Jessica Crouch, the Community Engagement Lead for ArchivesSpace. I'm joined today by ArchivesSpace Lead Program Manager, Christine DeBella. She'll be joining us a little bit later, and ArchivesSpace Program Assistant, Bailey Grace Harrell. This session is intended for people considering using ArchivesSpace. If you're already an ArchivesSpace member, this presentation will probably not offer any new information, but you're more than welcome to attend or watch. I'll begin by giving a brief overview of the ArchivesSpace program before moving to a light demonstration of the application itself. After, I'll provide information about ArchivesSpace membership and the benefits of being a member, not just a user of ArchivesSpace. We are using the latest version of ArchivesSpace for this demo. That is ArchivesSpace version 4.1.1. We won't be able to troubleshoot issues with your own implementations of ArchivesSpace, and we'll be focusing this demonstration on using the ArchivesSpace staff user interface and public user interface. If you have a question or issue with your own implementation, please email us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org, and that email address will be provided throughout this presentation. This session is being recorded, and all presentation slides and links will be made available with the recording. So, what is ArchivesSpace? ArchivesSpace is an open source content management system used by archivists in a variety of settings to manage and describe their collections and optionally make those collections publicly available through our public user interface. ArchivesSpace supports a range of functions performed in archives and special collections, including accessioning, arrangement, description, preservation, and access, and allows archivists to describe a variety of materials, including both physical items and digital objects, including born digital material. ArchivesSpace can also be used as a metadata authoring tool and supports both importing and exporting data in a variety of formats. ArchivesSpace is the successor to two widely used open source applications, Archivist Toolkit and Archon. We know many archives continue to use these two systems, and we do have migration tools available on our website for those users looking to migrate to ArchivesSpace from those legacy systems. But we also know that users are migrating to ArchivesSpace from a variety of content management systems. So in addition to the standard and metadata specific imports available within the application, we maintain a number of migration tools and data maps that can help make migration into ArchivesSpace easier for those looking to migrate from another system. So in short, ArchivesSpace is developed by archivists, supported by diverse archival repositories, and fills a common need for archives around the world. While the ArchivesSpace application is free to download and use, ArchivesSpace is a nonprofit organization, and we have a membership model to support the development of the application and user community. Our only organizations that are members of ArchivesSpace directly contribute to the sustainability of the application, and because of that support, members of ArchivesSpace are entitled to certain tangible benefits. I'm going to get into those after the demo. But in addition to these benefits, members also serve on the various governance groups within ArchivesSpace, including our User Advisory Council, Technical Advisory Council, and our board. Members are also asked to participate in community discussions and polls about the future development of the application. So in this way, ArchivesSpace members work together to create and improve an archives management application reflecting our values as archivists. That means ArchivesSpace is standards driven, is flexible and extensible, is customizable and localizable. It integrates with other applications people use to do their work, and it promotes efficiency overall. And ArchivesSpace is and provides an opportunity for archivists to manage and make available as much archival material as possible, no matter their institutional setting. We have ArchivesSpace members working in large government archives and major academic institutions, as well as small community archives and volunteer-driven historical societies making use of the application. This is because ArchivesSpace promotes adoption of standards and develops shared best practices across all of these organizations. And it brings people from different sizes and types of institutions together to solve common problems we all share. ArchivesSpace also provides the opportunity to take all of your work, all of this archival description, and make it available to users via a public user interface, which we're going to see a little bit later. So with that, I'm going to move over to the ArchivesSpace application and do a demo of the application. So before I do that, just a note, in this demonstration, I will be spending most of our time exploring the ArchivesSpace staff user interface. This is where archivists working to describe material will also be spending most of their time. After, I'm going to move over to the ArchivesSpace public user interface just to briefly show what it looks like for researchers and patrons, but we are going to spend most of our time looking at the staff user interface. Also, I want to mention that all of the examples you're about to see and that we use today are real collections held by ArchivesSpace member organizations. These organizations made their metadata available to the program for the purposes of education and training and in the interest of creating a more diverse set of example data for users. We're very grateful to these organizations for their willingness to share their data in this way. So with that, I am going to stop showing you this slide and move over to the ArchivesSpace application. I'm also going to minimize all of my chat and Q&A screens. Feel free to go ahead and start dropping questions into the Q&A as you have them, but just know that I'm not going to be paying a ton of attention to the Q&A. Bailey Grace will be watching the chat, so if there's anything urgent, like you can't hear me, she can alert me and let me know, but I'm going to minimize all of those screens now. All right, so this is the ArchivesSpace staff user interface. This is what a person using ArchivesSpace sees when they log into ArchivesSpace as a user. It looks very simple, and it is on first glance, but from here you can invoke all of the functions that you need to use ArchivesSpace. We say that this staff user interface area, this landing page when you log in, is divided into 4 zones. So that's how I'm going to describe it. The first zone or the first area that you're looking at, if you watch my mouse, is up here. This is related to repository and application management. This is top level stuff that you will need to do irregularly probably, and not everyone will need to have permissions to do in the system. The first option you have is the ability to select your repository. This would be if you are at an organization where you have multiple departments or multiple libraries, or maybe you're sharing an archive space with multiple organizations, and you each need to have your own repository within the application because you want to manage your own collections and manage your own data. And you don't want to have one shared single repository. You're sharing an archive space, not all of your data in that way. And this select repository area lets you move between the various repositories within your application. Again, that would be dependent on permissions. If you have a staff member who just needs to be working in one single repository, or maybe an intern or a student worker or whoever, their permissions could be set so that they would only log in and be able to access a single repository. But we're logged in as an administrator for the purposes of the demo, and someone with that level of permissions would be able to move between all of the repositories so that they can do what they need to do with that high level function. So you have this ability, like I said, to select your repository, but we're in the repository I want to be in, so we're not going to do that. You also have this system dropdown. And again, these are really high level functions, things you won't be doing every day in the application. Things like managing your controlled value list, container profiles, location profiles, which you see here. The ability to manage repositories. So if you do need to make changes to your various repositories, manage your OAI PMH settings. This is also where you can manage your users. So if you need to change user permission groups and things like that, or create new users, this is one of the functions where you can do that. And then also just an overview of the system information. Most of the system information, of course, is going to be happening in the backend, and your sysadmin or whoever is managing your application will see all of that. But this just gives you, as the staff user, an opportunity to look at that as well. I will note that all of these, again, are permissions dependent. Of course, you will not want every single staff person, if you're working in a larger organization, to have the ability to manage your repositories or manage your location profiles. So these are dependent on permissions. We have all of the permissions today. But if a user does not have the necessary permissions to access any of these options, when they select the system dropdown, they will not see them. All they will see is this ArchivesSpace Help Center option, which when you click that, that takes you out to the ArchivesSpace Help Center, which is a separate area available to ArchivesSpace members that contains our user manual, user tutorial videos, and recordings of all of our past trainings. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but just know that that's all that they would be able to see. And then finally, admin is the name of the account I'm using today, so you can always see who you're logged in as. And then from the drop in here, again, dependent on your permissions, you have the ability to change preferences. So preferences happen at various levels. Global preferences would be preference changes that would happen across your entire application. So all repositories, repository preferences would be, you guessed it, just within a single repository. And then your default preferences would be for a single user. There's a lot of documentation in our Help Center about how preferences work, but just, again, these are dependent on permissions. Also, if you are an admin or have this permission, you can become a user. It's super helpful if you have a staff member who is saying, I can't see that. I just can't do that. I'm really struggling. You can go in and look at how their ArchivesSpace is set up. Maybe they made a preference change for themselves that is changed the way ArchivesSpace looks for them, and you need to go in and just double check that. And you can manage accounts here. And of course, you can log out. So that's the first section. Again, super high level functions. Not everyone's going to do, and you're not going to do them every day. From there also, or let me pause, and then we're going to drop down to our second area. This again, high level sort of stuff. This is where you can do things related to user permissions, background jobs, reports, plugins. Again, not things you'll probably do every day and not things that everyone at your organization will need to do. But this is where instead of making changes to your system, like up here, this is where you can make changes sort of to your data, big changes like that. There are, again, things related to managing your permission groups and your user access here. Not everyone's going to need to do that, but administrators and people creating accounts will need to do that. You also have the ability to manage your assessment attributes. If you're making assessments and creating assessment records, not getting into that today, but just know that you can, create assessments of your materials if you need to for things like rehousing or even things like research value or perhaps display value, that sort of thing. You can create assessments and manage those attributes here. You can manage your top containers, so like your boxes and things, you can manage those here. You have the ability to transfer a repository. This you will do hopefully never, but very rarely. Maybe if two departments merge or two libraries merge, you can transfer a repository into another. You also have the ability to create background jobs. We don't have time to get into background jobs today, but that's a variety of things like you can create PDFs, various types of exports. You can do imports as background jobs, so import your data in, and we do have those bulk import templates that I mentioned to help make data migration easier to get into ArchivesSpace, so you can access those here. Really popular area of the application, definitely worth familiarizing yourself with. And then you also have the ability to run reports. So we have some canned reports that you can use, as well as a custom report template option where you can create your own reports that you can save and then use as you need to. And then finally, if you have any plugins within the application, you can invoke those here. ArchivesSpace comes with one plugin out of the box. That's the Library of Congress Name Authority File plugin. So that's why you see that here. But if you had any other plugins that you had added to your ArchivesSpace implementation, you'd be able to see those there as well. Okay. So the next area of the application from the staff user interface that you can access is where you'll be spending most of your time. And this is where you can go to create your records, right? Like this is the reason you want to be in ArchivesSpace is to create records. You also have the ability to browse records. Not going to spend a ton of time talking about browsing records. I would recommend going into the sandbox on our website, which I will talk about a little bit more later, and just playing around and looking at the different ways that you can browse, filter, and facet your browse options there. And then here is create. So this is how you can create records in ArchivesSpace. You can create a variety of record types within the application, but if you look here, you'll see we have accession records, resource records, so those are like your finding aid or catalog records, and digital object records. These three records, they exist above this little line here. These records are known collectively as your material description records. Your resource records and your digital object records both allow for multi-level description, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a second, but that's expressed through component records. Just know that you can create that hierarchy that we are very used to seeing as archivists and with our finding aids, and we will see what those look like. But all of the other records that you see under that line, the subject, agent, container profile, all of that, these records are for amplifying your material description records, right? So it's about linking related collections together through shared subject headings or adding a location to your box for your collection and saying, this is where this material lives. So it's about amplifying these records, adding additional information, linking things together, adding assessments, that sort of thing. So they're intended to be additive in that way. However, you can create them independently of an accession resource or digital object record. So, of course, it would be perfectly fine to create a finding aid, and when your finding aid is ready and you're ready to save it, you could add several subjects that relate to the collection and save the collection, and you now have all of these linked subjects so that your researchers or you can find related collections through linked subjects. Or alternatively, if you already know you very frequently use these 50 subjects, this is your collecting area, you know it very well, you could import those subjects in and they already exist as a thesaurus available to you. And whenever you're ready to save a new resource record or accession record or digital object record, you could just search for the pre-existing subject, link it, and save. So it's just dependent on your workflow, and both ways are fine. Similarly, like with locations, if you needed to, when you process a collection, you're done, here's your box, you're ready to put that box on a shelf, You could create a location within ArchivesSpace saying this is going to go to this floor on this shelf and do that, save it. Or you could create your locations in batch so that they exist before you're ready to put something on the shelf. And instead of having to create every single location individually as you are processing collections, you could say, all right, I'm ready to take this box and put it on this shelf. Let me see. All right, location saved. So again, these are just options for how you can work if you would like. And then finally, the other thing that you can do from the staff user interface landing page is you can search your records, right? So ArchivesSpace has a basic keyword search here that we're all familiar with how basic keyword search works, but you also can build out advanced searches. The advanced search field can be used in any combination together, but the search must be connected with Boolean operators and or are not are available, and is the default option. So yeah, you can get really granular in your search if there's something very specific you're looking for. But again, you also can dive into the browse options and browse for collections as well. You can see that there's a lot of ways to filter your search whenever you're using the browse functionality as well. But again, not going to dive into that too much. So I am going to very briefly show you, because I do want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, what an accession record, resource records, and digital object records look like. I've already got some keyed up here, so we're just going to move through those. But just know that if you need to create a record, it's time to create a record. The way you can do that is to go to the Create dropdown, obviously, and select the record type you would like to create. Or if you're in a browse screen, if you notice here, you have the ability to create a resource record from the resource record browse screen. And that's true of any browse screen. If you're in that browse screen and you say, oh, wow, I thought that existed and turns out it doesn't, I need to create it, you can always just go to create from that browse screen. Or, of course, the easy way is to just go to the dropdown and create, and you're provided with a blank record template that you can begin to fill out. I will point out before I move into an accession, a couple handy things that you probably are noticing right away. Of course, if you see a red asterisk, that means that something is required. That means that you need to have data there or you can't save it. Anywhere you see a red asterisk, that is true. And you'll get a warning if you try to save it and it isn't there. And then you'll also notice that as I'm scrolling probably too quickly for you to notice, actually, there are a lot of little question marks everywhere. So what does this mean? Anywhere you see a question mark, those are content sensitive, or those are help links. So anywhere that you see that question mark, that means that there is a related page in our user manual for that area of the application. So if you're creating your first resource record and you're not really sure what this means by level of description or identifier, you can always pop over here and it will take you directly to the correct page within the user manual so that you can learn more about that. You do have to be logged in, and of course you do have to be a member of ArchivesSpace, but you'll be able to go to the specific page that relates to what you're doing instead of having to go to the user manual, searching the user manual and finding it that way. So it's just a time-saving and helpful thing for members. And then finally, you will notice as you're moving through the application, if you hover over a field label, you'll get one of these tooltips. And the tooltips will just pop up as text, and they're associated with almost all of the labels in ArchivesSpace. You hover your mouse and it will tell you, typically it will define what the label is, what the field is, what should go there. It will give you a reference to the appropriate rule in DAX or whatever element or data format it's complying to and why you need to include that information there, like MARC or EAD. And then sometimes it will give you examples like it does here of good practice. These rollover texts can be completely modified for your application, so you can integrate your own processes and procedures directly into the application, or you could reference a different standard like ISAD-G, like this is referencing DAX. You could change that. You could also change it, obviously not for a required field, but if there was another field that at your organization you never used, you could add a field or a tooltip that says never use this or something like that. So you can get very specific with how these are administered. All right. So now we're going to move over to an accession record. And like I said, these are some, this is like the part of the cooking show where I'm showing you the thing that's already baked and finished. This is an accession record that has been created and saved within ArchivesSpace for the Krispy Kreme corporate records. You'll notice that within the accession record, there are not nearly as many red asterisks as we move through this. I'll go ahead and just point that out. Your accession records store information about the receipt of material. Typically, this means that they're unprocessed collections. An accession record can be within ArchivesSpace for a single item, so just a single diary or something, or it can be for an aggregate of materials like it is here. It can represent the acquisition of a new resource, so something you've never had before, or it can be an accrual to an existing resource, so it's your annual dump of materials from the president's office for your college archive or something like that. And it must record the accession date and the identifier. An accession record can include a lot more than that, of course, and you're probably going to want it to include a lot more than that. Like here you see included a title. You're going to probably want a content description just so you know what you're looking at. You may include an inventory or a box list, and you can also link related accession records together through things like agent links or subject links. You can also link related resource records. So once that collection is processed, you can link them together, and I'll show you a handy way to make that happen fast in just a second. But you can really like build out as much information as you need to make this accession record work for you. I will say for all things ArchivesSpace, just because there's a field there doesn't mean you need to put content in it. So just make sure that you are creating an accession record that works for you and includes information that you need it to include. But this is just an example of what that accession record might look like. When the time comes after you have brought this collection or accrual into your collection, and now it's time to process it, you can go ahead and create a resource record. And like I said, you could very easily create a resource record by going to that create dropdown or hitting create from the browse option. But another time-saving feature within ArchivesSpace is the ability to spawn a resource record from an accession record. So to do that, you would hit spawn. And you see you have three options here. You could spawn another accession record, a resource record, or an archivable object record. Spawn really just means auto-populate here. It takes some of the data, not all, because it does not all map exactly into a new record. So if you were to let's go back to that college archive example. If you every year you know you're going to get an accrual from the president's office, and every year you basically are doing the exact same thing, just changing the date. Instead of having to create that accession record over and over again, you could just take last year's accession record and spawn it into a new accession record and change the data that you need to change, add any new information you need to add, and save it that way. So it saves you a lot of time because it brings in a lot of this information that you have already provided within the fields in your saved accession record. Also, you could do I'm going to skip resource records really quickly and just also say, going back to that college archive example, if you do have something that's happening every year, like you're always getting an accrual, or you get something in that isn't its own standalone collection, is part of a collection you already have, we do have the ability to spawn an archival object, which is the component record to a resource record. And you'll see what that looks like in just a minute if you're like, what are you talking about? But you can spawn an archival object as well from an accession record. So again, if you have the collection, the president's office, and it's just every single year, it's a new series in that collection, you can spawn an archival object and just say, yep, this is the 2025 series, and do that. So you don't have to like create a brand new resource record. You actually can take that accession record and spawn a record and nest it where it needs to within the hierarchy. And then finally, you can spawn a new resource record. So it's time to process the collection. I want to bring over as much of this data as I can. And again, it doesn't all come over. So that goes back to, don't fill this accession record out with every single bit of data you have. Just use it for what you need to use it for, and then go from there. So it gives you a little jump start on processing your collection and that resource record. I will say, if you use the spawning functionality, just because you use the spawning functionality doesn't mean that record is saved. You need to save that new record for it to actually exist within your application. So make sure that when you use spawn, you are also saving. Don't just say, all right, I spawned it, it must be there. It will not be. You need to save the record, the new record that you've created. All right, so that's an accession record. I'm not going to do any of that spawning though. I'm going to move over to, again, a resource record that's already been created. I'm going to show you two resource records now really quickly. I'm going to show you first this diary. This is a single level resource record, meaning there's no hierarchy. I'll show you one with hierarchy in just a second. But within the context of ArchivesSpace, resources can be defined as materials that are in the custody of your repository and are being controlled according to archival principles. A resource can be a whole collection, or it can be a single item like this diary. and it's identified by an identifier or a title. Resource records are where you place the bulk of your information about the intellectual and physical characteristics of archival material. And within a given resource record, you can add a range of descriptive elements as well as notes, right statements, dates, extents. I'm going to slowly scroll so you can see some of that. Resource records can be supplemented with certain context and linked by related records like accession records. So again, if you're spawning this from another from an accession record, that linkage will already be applied. You can also link related digital object records. You can link subject records, which help link related collections together. The resource record module is really where you build your finding aid, you build your catalog, and you can then export that out in a variety of formats, including EAD, MarkXML, and PDF. So I'll show you here. Once you've saved your record, you'll have a whole bunch of options pop up for you here, including the ability to export, and you can, like I said, EAD, Mark. You can generate a PDF if you like to generate a PDF for your collections. So there's a variety of exports available to you there. So you see there's a lot within the resource record that you can include. I'll quickly point out a few things. From the left-hand side navigation, you notice I was scrolling down so you could see all of the sub-records available to you here and everything that you can include, and you can get to anything in the record by scrolling down. But another great way is through this left-hand navigation. Like if I know, oh, I just need to add a new agent, then I can just click agent links and it'll drop me right to the agent links where I can add a new agent. Maybe there's someone else in this diary that's referenced and they're a subject of the diary and I need to add them as well, not just Emma, who is the creator and author of the diary. Another thing I'll point out is you notice here with the subjects and both the subjects and the notes, you see like instead of seeing the actual subjects like you do with the agent, you just see this blue thing. That means that there are more than 5 records there. So there are 6 linked subjects and here there are 12 notes. It's just like a performance thing. So in order to make the application like work a little bit faster, anytime you have more than 5 sub-records anywhere, they're collapsed by default. And if you need to see them, you just click them and they'll open up. So you see that these are the related subject headings for this scrapbook. And then you can see here, if I click, you can see all of the notes. And these, of course, like very important to archival description, right? So this is where you're going to put your conditions governing access, your physical description, your scope and content note, anything like that, that will all be created here. And if you don't like your notes order, you can always drag and drop and change them. You can also set a standard note order in your preferences. So that's important to point out. And then the last thing I'll point out before showing you some hierarchy is if you need to, and you will want to record where this material lives, you do that through the instances. So here you can tell that there is one diary and it lives in this box. So box 1 here. And if you hit view, you'll be able to get a little more context about that box, its location, that sort of thing. But this is where you could say like, this item here, I'm describing it, and this is where it lives. You do that through instances. If you have a digital object of this, so if we made a scan of this diary, you also could add that here as well and say like, not only do we have this physical diary in this box here, we also have the digital, like the PDF scan available as well. And that could be added there if you needed to, or maybe it got microfilmed 30 years ago. You could include that there's a microfilm somewhere in a drawer. So that's where you can like really describe where the thing lives, where it is physically residing, or if it's a digital object, link out to that digital material. All right. Now I'm going to very quickly move over to another resource record. These are the Krispy Kreme corporate records that we just looked at their accession record. This is the processed collection. Here you can see there is hierarchy. So just like with the diary, this is the same. This top level basic information is all the same requirements that you include for your collection. But this is not just a diary. This is tons and tons of boxes of materials related to donuts. So that's when you really want to build out the hierarchy within your collection. And you can do that within ArchivesSpace by adding children and then adding siblings to those children. You can do this one record at a time within ArchivesSpace through this add child, add sibling. We also have the ability to load it in via spreadsheet, which is great for many, many reasons and can be a major time saver for you, and also can help if you have like a lot of staff working in the application. You don't necessarily want them all working in ArchivesSpace in the same way. You want to be able to review spreadsheets and then upload them yourself. This is great functionality and a lot of information in the Help Center about that. You can see here, if we pull down, you can see the hierarchy. There are multiple series within this collection. And then within each of those series, you see the individual files. and where those individual files live. You also have the ability to include, like within this series, there are subseries, and then the files within those subseries. Let's collapse it so it's not so much scrolling. So you really have the ability to build out the hierarchy as you need, and then you can click anywhere like I just did, and it will open up that particular record within. So here we're looking at a subseries, and you can manipulate any information that you need about that. Obviously, for your component records, there's a lot less required. You can see the various included levels of description here. Again, all of this data is available in our sandbox. So I do recommend, if you're interested in playing around with this, going to our sandbox and looking at this and trying some things out. You're welcome to change any of that data you want. It gets cleared out frequently. All right, the last record type I'm going to show you before very quickly moving over to the public user interface is digital objects. So what I just did is I just moved over to a digital object record. If you're not familiar with the application, it probably looks like the exact same thing, and it is very similar. The digital object module includes many of the same elements, but digital objects in ArchivesSpace are managed a little bit differently. I do want to point out that ArchivesSpace is not a digital asset management system, and you cannot ingest or store digital materials into ArchivesSpace. ArchivesSpace supports the management of digital object metadata, allowing you to manage description of your archival holdings within one system. The assumption is that the files will be stored and managed in a network or a web accessible location like a file server or a digital asset management system that's capable of managing the files, and then they're linked back to ArchivesSpace. So that way, all of your materials are being described and discoverable within the same location. Like I said with the diary, like if you scan the diary, you can have an instance where you have the physical diary and the digital object. Now they're linked together, and you're not duplicating description, and you're making it more apparent that there are multiple ways to access that material. For born digital material, you could use the either resource record and add instances, or the digital objects module, depending on if you're interested in various metadata exports, to create hierarchy in that way, and then link out to where the related content lives. From here, what we're looking at here is a single digital object. A simple digital object like this is one in which the intellectual content of the object is contained within one content file. And that is like a garbledy sentence, basically just to mean that this digital object itself, which is a photograph, is one single file. So if you clicked this link, you would be taken to the picture, which is a single file. I'm going to show you a complex digital object in just a second. But just know that either way to manage your files is fine. But I'll explain that one in just a second. But this is a simple digital object. The biggest difference between when you're looking at something like a resource record and a digital object record is this file version section. This is where you include that link. That is where you include that information about, like, this is where you can go see that thing. So you always want to include a file URI, and it is required. But you can also include many of the same elements that you can include in a resource record. So you can link related subjects to this. You can link related agents. You can add information like the date and extents of the material. You can link other things like external documents. So you can really build out the information about this item. Or if you are using a digital asset management system and you really just need to be able to link to it, you can include these three required elements and move on. So this is what a single, just simple one file digital object looks like in ArchivesSpace. If you need to export out this data to include somewhere else, ArchivesSpace allows for digital object metadata to be exported as METS mods or Dublin. And then finally, this is a complex digital object. So again, it looks very similar to the resource record, the Krispy Kreme resource record, where it has hierarchy. It's conceptually very similar. A complex digital object in ArchivesSpace is one in which the intellectual content is distributed over 2 or more digital files. So it's multi-level in structure. They comprise a parent level metadata record that represents the entire item, much like a resource record, and then they have 1 or more child level components, again, much like a hierarchical resource record or finding aid. A complex digital object, again, the biggest difference is you have multiple files within the digital object, and you need to be able to point to the multiple files themselves. So Going back to the diary that we talked about earlier, you could choose to digitize that item either by scanning the diary, which could be 100 pages, and taking that scan and converting it to one single PDF, right? And then you have one PDF. It's a 100-page PDF, but it's one digital file. So you could describe that diary and include that one digital file and create the diary as a simple digital object, and that's perfectly fine. Or you could scan all 100 pages of that diary, and each individual page is its own individual JPEG that you need to link to individually. And then you would build a complex digital object where you would have a top level describing the diary, and then you would have 100 child pages where each one would link to the individual page. Again, also completely acceptable within ArchivesSpace. It just would be up to you to decide how you would want to express that and how you want to be consistent in your expression of your digital objects. Digital objects are very complex. We're not going to have a ton of time to get into them, but I will say there's a lot of documentation and a lot of trainings in our help center. We also do have some older trainings in our YouTube channel available to anyone about digital objects. So if you're interested in diving into this a little bit more, I would recommend going there. All right. And then the last thing I'm going to show you before we move back over to slides is our public user interface. So the way I'm going to get to the public user interface now is the way anyone on the staff side can do. They can scroll down to the bottom and just select View Public Interface. That would only work, of course, if you were using the ArchivesSpace public user interface and had turned it on. ArchivesSpace does include a public interface, which publishes the archival description that's entered into the staff interface, but it is only the material you elect to publish. So I'm going to pop back over to the digital object we were just looking at. Notice that publish box is checked. So all throughout the application, you'll see things like publish checkboxes that you need to check to make sure that the material is being published if you want to publish it to the public user interface, or make use of publish all checkboxes, which are included in resource records and digital object records. If you do not elect to publish it, or if you forget to publish it, the material will not be available in the public user interface. ArchivesSpace does automatically index any data you put in. So as soon as you do elect to publish it, it will be available in the PUI, but it will not go there on its own. Use of the public user interface is totally optional, like I said. Instead of using the public interface, some repositories choose to export metadata outputs to other systems. Excuse me. All right, let's try that again. Some repositories choose to export out to other systems, or maybe finding a aggregator. And some people have their own front end or choose to use another front end like ArcLight. Some organizations will do things like download the PDF and then put the PDF on their website. So, not everyone uses the PUI. Here is the default homepage of the public user interface, though. This has no customizations to it. You're probably looking at it and like, well, that doesn't look like how I want it to look. You can definitely customize the ArchivesSpace PUI easily. You're going to want to do things like change the logo to add your own, change the colors to represent, your branding. You can do all of that. Some organizations make even bigger customizations via plugin or other forms of development. And one of the great things about our community is that users frequently share these tools on our with the rest of the community. And on our Who's Using ArchivesSpace page on our website, that's a great place to go and see what other organizations are doing with ArchivesSpace. Anywhere you see a member's name on the Who's Using ArchivesSpace page, if there's a hyperlink, that takes you to their public user interface. So that it's a great place to go and look for organizations and see what people are doing and see how lightly some people are customizing and how really creative people can get in customizing their PUI. And then you can look online or through our listservs if you become a member to see if some of those resources for some of those more heavily customized PUIs are available. Like I said, I'm not going to spend nearly as much time here as I did in the staff interface, but for the purposes of the overview, I'll say make sure that you're publishing everything if you want to use the PUI, but do keep in mind it's totally optional and nothing is automatically published without your deliberate intervention. And it is a great way to provide the ability to browse and sort the record types on a variety of parameters across your entire application, not just your repository. So that is one major difference in the PUI as opposed to the staff user interface. In the the staff user interface, when you're in a repository, working in a repository, you're only seeing the collections and the records within that single repository. If you're in the public user interface, you're searching across all repositories. So you're getting results for every library, every department that is contributing to this ArchivesSpace application. That way that, you can better plan your resource trips or your research trips and things like that. You can browse by specific record types. So if you wanted, you could just browse by collections, like that. And here you're getting a list of all of the collections across all of the repositories within your ArchivesSpace implementation. There are 2 repositories here, so we're seeing the collections for all of those repositories. You can filter by repository if you need to. You can also facet by a variety of other parameters like subjects, languages, that sort of thing. And then you can also filter your results by doing a basic keyword search, or if you need, like you're trying to do a class assignment where you're told to look up something from a specific period, you can search by year. You can also do things like, if I know I only have time to go to one library, I just need to look at what's in that one library, you can do that as well. You can search by various subjects, agents. So there's a lot of options there. And then just like in the staff user interface, you have the ability to do a basic keyword search. You can limit that search a little bit, and you can define the search field, but you can do a basic keyword search. And then you also can add and create more complex searches. So again, you have that ability to do that. I've said it a bunch, but I highly encourage you to explore the PUI through our sandbox. The sandbox is an open play space available online where you can try out the application without having to download anything. It is available from the Getting Started page of our website. Again, all these links are going to be shared with you at the end, but I really recommend playing around with it. All right, and then let's very quickly move back to our slides. As I mentioned before, while the ArchivesSpace application is free to download and use, ArchivesSpace has a membership model to support the development of the application and user community. Since ArchivesSpace members directly contribute to the sustainability of the application, they're entitled to certain benefits, in addition to the ability to serve on the governance councils and provide input on development, like I mentioned earlier. Currently, there are over 500 ArchivesSpace member organizations, and membership is at the organizational level. So all employees within an organization are entitled to benefits regardless of the size or how much staff you have. Membership is distributed across 5 levels, and they have corresponding fees. Membership levels range from very small, which is a $300 membership fee, to very large, which has a $7,500 membership fee. And over half of our members are either very small or small organizations. Membership levels are intended to reflect organizational size and capacity. So all members are entitled to the same benefits. It doesn't matter what your organizational size is or membership size is, everyone gets the same benefits. In addition to these levels, we do have other types of membership and affiliation for organizations working with ArchivesSpace outside of normal work. Like we have a free educational program membership. We have a consortium provider program. So if you're from an organization like that, where you're not using ArchivesSpace to just describe your own materials, there are other ways to affiliate with ArchivesSpace, but we're talking about general membership today. And again, I'm going to be providing a lot of links at the end of this presentation. All right, so what are all these benefits I keep talking about membership to ArchivesSpace? So first, of course, you get access to the Help Center, which I've referenced before. That includes the ArchivesSpace user manual, user tutorial videos, and recordings of past trainings. So if you missed one of our live trainings, you can watch it again, or you can watch the recording. You also get discounts on live trainings. So you can attend one of our trainings at a discount. You can receive technical support of the application. You get access to member-only events and programs like the ArchivesSpace member forums we hold in person and virtually every year, as well as things like the ArchivesSpace Member Match program, which is a peer-to-peer support program. You also get access to our member-only listservs, where members communicate with one another and we broadcast important news and announcements. And you get the ability to collaborate with archivists around the world and to guide the development of an application and member community that is used by archivists around the world. So finally, this slide, again, is going to be recorded or included with the recording, but this includes all of those helpful links that I mentioned before. You can find all of this on our website, but I will say the 2 at the top, the Getting Started page and the page related to membership fees and levels, those are the best place to start. Getting Started can take you to the sandbox, explain how to download the application, give you some good resources, and the membership benefits, fees, and levels explains that, as well as all of our member benefits. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there because I want to leave time for questions, take a sip of water, and catch up in the chat. All right. All right. So we've got 2 questions in the Q&A already. If anyone would like to add any questions to the Q&A, please feel free to do so. I'm just going to answer in order. All right. So Gail asks, is there a recommended digital object management system for use with ArchivesSpace? So ArchivesSpace itself can integrate with a variety of systems. There is no one single system that we point to and say this is the best digital asset management system. It really depends on your needs and what you're looking for. There are, organizations that are using systems, really large systems like Preservica. There are other free open source softwares out there like Omeka and DuraCloud, which can offer a digital solution for you. There are also organizations that are just managing their digital files on their own servers. It really just depends on your resources, what you have available to you, and what you need to do to manage those files. And like I said, you can build out your digital object metadata directly within ArchivesSpace. So if maybe you're not using a digital asset management system, you're managing your files a different way, you can use ArchivesSpace to be that system of record. So it really just depends on your individual use case and what your needs are. I will say that question around like, how do you manage your digital files is very popular within the ArchivesSpace community. So if you do happen to join as members, that would be a question that would get a lot of discussion going on the listserv. Will says, what are the most common options for linking to other PUIs? You mentioned ArcLight. What are other common ones? So yeah, ArcLight is very popular to use as a public user interface. Like I said, some people choose to export out their PDFs and then just to link them directly on their website, or they use their own website in some way to link to their ArchivesSpace implementation. Again, it just really depends. That there's a variety of use cases out there, and a lot of people are just using the ArchivesSpace PUI. So again, it'll be a great question for the listserv, but it really just depends on your needs and your use case. Brian asked about collapsing boxes by default. I'm not going to be able to let me see if I can get that open.
This is Christine DeBell. I'm the program manager for ArchivesSpace. I know, Jessica, that's like hard to answer that live. I had a little more time to look at it. So one thing, Brian, is I'm not sure if you have also checked out the collection organization tab on the public interface, because that does show all the folders, all the boxes, all the things at once. The collection inventory tab is really to sort of like list by box. These are the boxes that are associated with the collection. So the collection organization tab may already do what you want, and the existing PDF may already do what you want. If it doesn't, you do have the possibility of writing a plugin that overrides some of the functionality of ArchivesSpace for yourself. Or like in the case of the PDFs, depending on which PDF you're using, you might have the option of writing your own style sheet. Or Jessica's mentioned, like our community is great about sharing things that have worked for them, sharing them with others in the community. So there may already be someone who's done the kind of thing that you want to do, and you could, either get that from them, or you could adapt that to work really well for your own purposes.
Thanks, Christine. It gave me a second to catch my breath. Are there any other questions? We're all caught up on the Q&A, but I want to make sure we leave plenty of time. But we also don't have to stay here forever if there are no other questions. I'm trying to talk slowly to see if anyone's typing furiously. But if not, Oh, okay. So a question, are there any known libguides on ArchivesSpace integrations? I would recommend checking out first there's a GitHub called Awesome ArchivesSpace. From there you can see there's a where community generated resources are. There are things like documentation, plugins, that sort of thing. We also have some documentation on our wiki related to integrations and systems that integrate with ArchivesSpace. And if there's any specific integration you're interested in, you can always email us, and we can answer that question as best that we can. But again, the awesome ArchivesSpace GitHub is a great starting point to see where there's community generated resources. And we do have a variety of resources on the ArchivesSpace wiki, which is separate from our website, but you can find that from our website. So I answered that twice, but I wanted to answer it a little bit slower the second time. All right. So I'm not seeing any other questions pop up. I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all of you for attending today. We will be uploading the recording of this demo on our website and linking the related slides, but you can always reach out to us with any questions that you have at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org, and we can get back to you. And I look forward to hearing from all of you soon. Thanks.